Welcome to the first edition of the Nahar Jito Bookathon, presented in association with the Raisoni Foundation. In this session, we will explore the fascinating stories of the book Anarkali, the Courtesan, the Pawn and the Queen by Harshali Singh, a woman loved by many but understood by none. Was Anarkali a pawn in the hands of a controlling monarch, or was she the knight? Anarkali's dream of becoming a celebrated courtesan in Emperor Akbar's harem in 16th century Hindustan is realized, but soon life at Lahore's Shahi Mahal becomes mundane for the free-spirited girl. In the midst of this ennui, Anarkali is pulled into a taboo relationship with the childlike Salim, Akbar-e-Azam's heir, apparent and favorite son. Marooned amid relationships that shatter her heart and threaten her life, Anarkali traverses the intrigues of the royal harem, using her wiles to survive while skirting passion, danger, and violence. She uses her charms, knowing men only want parts of her and never the whole, until she makes the ultimate mistake of raising her voice against powerful men. Was she purposefully erased from the annals of history for questioning free will? I'm honored to introduce Dr. Harshali Singh. She's a multifaceted professional, serving as a judge at the District Consumer Dispute Redressal Commission, an award-winning author, poet, academician, occupational therapist, and a painter. She is the recipient of prestigious awards such as the Munshi Premchand Literature Award 2023 and the Ashoka Award 2023. Her notable works include the Haveli series and Anarkali, the Courtesan, the Pawn, and the Queen. As a founding member of the House of Harmony, she is dedicated to promoting literature and supporting both seasoned and debut authors. This session will be moderated by Sukaina Maji. She is an avid reader who dabbles in writing about her personal experiences as short stories and looking at stories of women through the gender lens. She has been actively working with authors and publishers from the last 7 years. She runs a book club called Read With Us with her co-founders Astha Anand and Khushi Rungta. Sukaina aims to promote books that talk about new characters, and through her book club aims to end the barriers built between a reader and an author. As a book blogger, she aims to talk more about seasoned Indian authors and the new authors simultaneously. Now, I would like to hand over the session to Ms. Sukaina Maji.
Welcome, Harshali. It is great to have you here.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be having this conversation with you in this Nahar Jito bookathon. And it feels so nice to talk about the book because I'm so excited about it. I'm so passionate about the story, etc.
As am I, because you personally know it that I am a big fan of the book, and I'm always really excited and really passionate about the book as well. So let's start with talking about the book as well. So we have so many women out there who are voiceless. They do not have a voice in history. So I ask this to every author when they write about women of history. Out of all the countless, voiceless women, why did you choose to write about Anarkali?
Actually, just to give you a little bit of context, this conversation was being had. I was having this conversation with my publisher, Dipankar Mukherjee of Readomania, and we got into this kind of back and forth with each other, this banter that why are we not writing more about mysterious women of history who have only been shown in a certain way. They've not been given the space to kind of shine, and all their other aspects and all their other facets have not been allowed to shine. So, and from that conversation, this concept that one of the biggest examples is Anarkali, that she is always seen as this damsel in distress who's always in love, who's a courtesan but is in love with Salim, who's the stepson. And I said, how can it be that this young girl who was brought into the harem, she is not given the space. Nobody has explored her other facets. Sure, there are many more, because a woman is not only one dimensional. She has many other multifaceted, and she has the ability to find the strength in her to survive. And it's been proved over and over again in our own lives, in today's women, in the women of the past, and we've seen it over and over. So from this conversation, this idea of writing on Anarkali started, or it was the genesis of the idea was that conversation. And the surprising thing was that though I was feeling very passionately about Anarkali, I had never really gone into the annals of history and tried to find out more about her. So when I did that, because my publisher said that, why don't you write about her? Why don't you explore her personality and what would have happened to her, through research, through other ways, and write about how you think she would have been. So when I started looking out, I started going to libraries, I started trying to find material on her to research. I was completely flabbergasted that she does not find mention in the Akbarnama, which is the chronicle of the reign of Akbar, nor does she find any mention in the Tuzke Jahangir kaha jata hai, the Jahangir Nama, so to say, the chronicles of Jahangir times, who was actually Salim. He was Akbar's son, and then was renamed as Jahangir. Now, these are the two main emperors that she impacted. She was able to, influence both of these men who were such great rulers of the Mughal times and had such a huge role to play in the landscape of our country. So it was very surprising to me that there was nothing written about her at all in both the history of the times of Akbar or Salim or Jahangir, in that way. So there the need to know about her kind of became more pronounced. I wanted to know that how is it this woman that we have been seeing in movies like Mughal-e-Azam, reading about her, etc., how can nothing be written about her? She actually found her first mention is in it's like a 3 line paragraph written by a traveler who had come from outside or abroad, and he wrote about her. He was actually a trader, and his name was, and he wrote about her 11 years after she had passed. And that is written about her is that she was buried alive in the wall of the Mahal of the emperor. And this happened around 1597 or 98. And he wrote about her in around 1608 or something like that. In the 1600s, he wrote about her. So 11 years after she had passed. So again, she finds mention in another traveler, who came later on after William Finch, called Edward Terry, and he also wrote something similar, that wherein Akbar had threatened to disinherit or Jahangir because he was in some kind of taboo relationship with a courtesan of the court, or something like that. He wrote. So there is no historical proof or that Anarkali existed, or that there was a woman who had so much influence over these Mughal emperors. So I felt that there was a kind of out reason why someone would have wanted to remove her from history and make sure that nobody really knew who she was. And that is how I wanted to know more about this legendary, this impactful woman. And that's how I started looking for her roots. Though I didn't find much, only some obscure articles or some stories, some few leads that I found here and there in cinema and in theater, things like that. So there is some bit of it written about her, but due to whatever reasons, there were people who did not want her to be kind of the populace to kind of know about her. And that really sparked my interest, and even more than what it was before, to write about her, to delve into her mind and the kind of woman she would have been, that she probably threatened somebody so much who had so much power, that they just wanted to remove her, erase her from history. So that is how why I think I wrote the story for her primarily, because I refuse to believe that Anarkali would just have been a one who thought of nothing else except falling in love, and so there has to be something more behind the beauty, because certainly there were other many more beautiful women who were given as gifts to Akbar, who were brought as as tributes, as gifts of war, or things like that. So she was not the only beautiful woman in the harem. There had to be other women. Uh, so that's the reason I think I wanted to write about her as the woman alone. I mean, I didn't want to kind of segregate it to what was Akbar doing, what was Salim doing at the time in terms of political unrest or anything like that. I wanted to just keep my focus on the woman that was Anarkali. Yeah.
So we can certainly say that this was a homage to how would you say, Anarkali herself.
Anarkali, yes, certainly, absolutely. You hit the nail on the head, I think.
Yes. So it is also something very striking when one reads the book, is that there are two parts of the book, where one part you have written about the Kanis, Anarkali, and then there is another part where you've written about Nadira, the young girl, who also has clashes with where you have covered the relationship of a mother and a daughter, and where you have shown an aspect about Nadira's mother and the sacrifices she makes, and the other side you have also covered. So you have also covered the how would you say, the understanding that Anarkali as a Kanis has, but also the burden she feels that she has to, that to survive she has to be in the harem, so that she can be provided a space to live for her sister and her mother. So tell me something more about why these two were written so separately, and yet
Yeah. So you're absolutely right. Actually, that's a wonderful aspect of the book that you were able to pick up. And, I'm really surprised that you were, but I guess, when you have a before and an after, I think people relate to that, because I think as a girl or as a woman, you do have a before and after. So it can be, an existential crisis that makes you split up your life between what has happened before and how you were before and how you were after that particular event. I think that event for her was when she was wanting. So Nadira was this child who was seeking approval from her mother Jillobai. And that is why since she had seen her father's fallibility and the fact that and also her mother's abuse at the hands of all the dacoits that were there while they were on the run, I think she lost her innocence way before she actually lost it physically. So if you look around yourself in today's time and age, you see a lot of this happening all around you, where children are young girls who should not be knowing about a lot of things are exposed to it, because it's a fight for survival. You're trying to survive in a world which has literally, sometimes I feel, gone mad. So with Anarkali or with Nadira, she was a child who was just trying to survive, and in the process help her mother, help her family, because she knew that she was the only breadwinner. And it was just a stroke of luck that she caught the eye of this emperor who was visiting at the time. And she knew that she only had one skill set, which was her beauty. Because, we have to remember that this is the time of the times when women were seen as second class citizens all over the world, in a way. So she knew that she had to use her wiles so that that Akbar would take her back to Lahore, that she would have a safe space or a place to stay so that they were not on the road or in danger at all times from everywhere. And so she made use of those skill sets that she realized she had. And, she did whatever she had to do so that she could survive. And we see so many women do that even around us, that they're literally hanging from the edge of their nails so that they can go from one day to the next. And that is what I wanted to show through Nadira. Now, in the chapters that where she is training, what I wanted to show was that she had the passion, she had a goal, that I want to become this celebrated courtesan in Akbar's court, in Akbar's harem. And so I wanted to show that she was, to reach that goal, she was willing to put in the hard work, the dedication, because learning those difficult dances and those ragas is not an easy thing. She would have taken years and years to do it. And that also under the tutelage of a very difficult Khala who was hell bent on making her life difficult and more, making it difficult for her to go to 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 learn from her. Sometimes teachers can have that, wherein their own biases and everything will fall on a particular child, or children around them, because they are not able to get what they aimed for. So the event in her life that I wanted as the axis of the story was the loss of her innocence. The fact that she finally got what she was looking for. She was finally taken into the harem, and she became the famed Anarkali, who was christened by the great Mughal emperor himself. But what after that? You know, so for Anarkali, I wanted to expound on her ambition, the fact that her survival instincts and coping mechanisms had brought her to this place. But now she was like, okay, I've got what I wanted. Now what do I do? So many times it happens that you keep aiming or you keep hoping and you keep praying for a particular thing. And once you've got it, now you feel very empty. You feel, okay, numb. That, okay, now I've got what I wanted to get or what I wanted to achieve. What am I supposed to do now? Nobody told me ki iske baad kya karna. So that is also what I wanted to show, that this is the consequence. Like all the movies and all the plays and all the books also, in fact, end at a nice phase, or nice that the hero heroine meet and it's all happily ever after. But now that the hero heroine have met, that means Akbar and Anarkali have come together. Now what does she do now? Because all her energy, all her anticipation, all her prayers have been answered. So, and she's a young girl. She's not a woman who's at the fag end of her life as Akbar would have been. So those kind of things I wanted to show about Anarkali, that how young girls or young women, I see who have achieved a lot in their lives. But now they don't know what to do with themselves, because they've got a wonderful job, they've got a wonderful home, they've achieved the riches that they wanted to, but they feel empty inside, because they didn't set out another goal for themselves. So they feel that what are we supposed to do with all this now? So I was trying to probably find layers in the history as well as the present. And I think that is what I was aiming for. I'm so glad that it touched a nerve with you, because Anarkali knew what she wanted. She knew that, that her ability to work her way through the minefield of the Mughal court or the harem, which was very hierarchical, had to be very, very, she had to be very, very strong, or very, very aware or immensely aware of herself. So for Akbar, she plays this innocent siren, she's trying to be different with him, and she realizes that I cannot be like all the other beautiful women who are acting very coy, and because everybody is doing that. So she has to do something different so that she keeps his attention on her. With Salim, she is the damsel, the dependent, because he needs that. He needs somebody to say, "Oh, you are such a wonderful man," because to keep stroking his ego that, "No, I'm only dependent on you," because that's the person he is. And with Durjan, who's his friend, there is some part of her which can shed her layers. She can be a little bit of herself with him, tell him about the ugliness or the reality of herself, which you cannot do with everybody, even if they're your friends. But there is a special person in most people's life wherein you can show your real and true emotions and not be scared that you will be judged for them, or because we all have all kinds of gamuts of emotions within us, but there's always a person who you can go and say that, okay, today I'm feeling jealous, or I'm feeling envious, or I did this or that, and that they will understand that it is a part
That
of
person
you.
will not judge.
Yes,
So a very,
exactly.
very
So
integral
yeah,
part of who Durian was.
absolutely, absolutely. So I think for her, Durjan was that person for
Yes,
however long it was. Yeah.
yes. So, coming to the chapters at the beginning of all the chapters, your visual storytelling is so strong that it kind of, keeps you hooked and to the story, because every chapter, when you open the first page, it pulls you in, and you start, kind of imagining. Well, when we had that, we've also had a conversation around that with another friend.
Hmm.
So, how did you go about imagining the scenes when you were writing? Because that is such an integral part in actually in reading, that we want to see that as a movie, but also
Hmm.
enjoy the book, and also so
Yeah.
shed some light on that.
So Kenna, you're so right. I think we tend to gravitate towards like to read. I think I am a very visual reader. So that is the kind so I would want to visualize and research. I will want to search. I think my books I research. I have enough of it in hand. I'm able to confidently say that, okay, now I'm going to write about this. Now, there is so much out there about the Mughal era, about what they were wearing, what they were eating, how they were living, etc., that you can easily get lost. So that was one of the things I learned about research, was that it has to be very focused. That otherwise, if people like me who like to read, who like to research, they just get lost. You just keep reading about that era, and you keep so I had to kind of bring myself back every time, that, okay, this is my story, I have to stick to it. But certainly I think the reason why it is visual is because of a lot of notes that I made, lot of books that I read, lot of libraries that I sat in, the dusty ones, a lot of people I spoke to. Um, so there is no dearth of material out there if you are the kinds who like to do that. Um, uh, and that is what I did. There are these semi-official histories which are there. There is, of course, the official histories of Akbar and Jahangir. There are translated versions that you can read through. So there are biological dictionaries. There are biographical dictionaries. There are regional lists and histories that are there. There is inscriptions and coinage from the Akbar times that you can refer to. There is letters actually of priests, or of the times that people were writing to each other, so they were discussing what we are doing. So whatever I got my hands on in the time that I had, I tried to incorporate that in some form or the other, or get the maximum out of the research there, because it is there, and it is vast. So you would need years and years of research to be comfortable or to be satisfied. But if you pick up a certain aspect and then only research on that, you are able to find a decent amount of work on which you can, on facts which you can base your story on. Now, the one of the things was that I like to read was the travelogues. People have written about their travel, through the times through Hindustan at that times. There were articles, there are guides, there are travel books, etc., regarding the weather, the conditions, the changes in the geography that have happened around that time, from that time to now, then the kind of flora and fauna that is there. So you need, because if you're writing a scene, it's not about just the two characters, they're standing somewhere. So you cannot mention a tree which probably doesn't grow in Lahore. It grows somewhere else. So you can't mention that. You have to mention the tree, or the shade, the fruit that they're eating. It has to be of that region that you are basing your book on. So these are small things which a reader who is scholarly, or who is because I write for an intelligent reader. So if an intelligent reader will go and check, a lot of people came back who were reviewing the book. They said, no, once we read this paragraph, we wanted to know if actually this fruit is there or not. So we went and checked on Wikipedia, Google, or whatever they had their hands on, whether this fruit or this tree or this weather, or this kind of growth, or the stones, etc., really are there or not. So the indigenous tribes that I've written about, the Pashtuns, their habits, their dialect, the food that they eat, especially because I wrote about the Pashtun tribes, so I based my research only on that. But there is so much. I mean, it's like the ideas keep coming up. So similarly, when I visited Fatehpur Sikri, I visited it twice. So I visited it before while I was younger, and while I was, when we had just gone for a trip. But once I had written the book, after researching it, I went again. And it completely is different when you know about the place, a certain place, when you know about what people were doing in the Panch Mahal, or how Tansen would have sat in the middle of that Anup Talab and, sung there while Akbar was in his khwabga or his bedroom, and all the lamps were lit around him, and how that would have looked. So I think visualization of any particular material or piece will come if you're sure of the research that you have done on that particular topic. Till then, I think as an author, I would not be confident to even put it out there for people's consumption in any form or manner, because for me to be confident that when a reader reads it and goes out and researches, they will find the same things that I did. So I think for making it authentic, that is most important. Yeah.
Yes. Somebody has raised their hand. Yes.
Hello.
Yes.
Hansel,
Shadi
your video is not visible.
Yeah.
Oh, acha, it has gone.
हाँ.
अपने आप कैसे चला गया?
So,
हाँ.
it started.
Is it okay? Should we restart?
It's
Sorry.
So, the readership of today has changed. So, over the years, Anarkali has been written about several times. So, do you think that if the book was written, hello, if the book was written few years back, it would have gotten the same response. Would Anarkali be seen as a strong woman, and her story of survival would also have received the same response?
I think so. I think we all like a character who is wholesome. I think we all like to read or know about a person who is strong, and I think feminists have been there all through the time, and I think for me, Anarkali is not only a very beautiful character or only a good character. She has her flaws. She is envious. She does take decisions which may not be right according to society. So she does make all these mistakes. She learns from them. She has learned how to survive. And her decisions are based on that survival. For example, I think she would have known as a person that because I've written about Akbar as an aging monarch, so she knew that Salim is the next heir apparent. He was the one who was the front runner to get the throne. So she would have known that eventually the throne will go to him. And how do I secure my space, or my place in the court or in the palace by being close to him? Now that could have been twisted into any other form or manner, but eventually she probably realized that she has to align herself with the power center. And I don't think she was completely unaware and it was only love, or it was only, that I'm in love with him, or I don't know who he is, because she knew Salim was her stepson. So it was not as if she was completely unaware. Whatever decision she took, I feel, this is my opinion, but I feel that she would have taken with the realization that he is going to be the most powerful person, in the whole of the empire, and I need to be next to him or near him at least, so that nobody, because she came from nothing. She did not have a godfather, godmother, or anybody behind her. She was just this young woman who was a young girl who was pulled into the harem at a very young age. So she had the wherewithal and the ability, the mindset, the skill set to climb that ladder to become the most favored courtesan to Akbar, who was again not a young person. He would have had his share of women. He would have had his share of, whatever available to him. So I don't think she was completely, unaware, or she was just an innocent girl who was only in love. I don't think so. I think she would have been aware, very much aware, and she would have taken that decision knowing that there were people depending on her to be at a certain place, so that she could financially provide for them, so that she could give them whatever they desired, etc. What you were saying earlier, a mother and a sister. And of course, there is a social pressure, there is a social standing. There were women who were thrown out of the harem as soon as the power center shifted. There were women who were killed, there were women. So all that was there. So, so far as whether she would have been Anarkali or the book would have been accepted a few years back, I think so. I think women always, root for, a woman who
Strong
knows
women
herself, who owns her
somebody
agency, who allows herself to feel whatever she needs to feel. And you can have your opinions about her, you can like her, dislike her, but she's there,
Yeah, she wasn't able to defy the norms, but she
Yeah.
knew that she had more powers than the others.
Yeah.
That is definitely something that everybody realizes.
Relate to. Yeah.
So, Anarkali is a story about the women and her struggle to live, as we have discussed. How do the themes in your book actually, relate to current trends? What relevance in your book book has in today's fast evolving world where continuous learning is crucial? So Anarkali in 2024, what would she be, and how would your be a perfect example or perfect trend in giving us learnings and some things that maybe today's world is not able to provide us?
I think it's the core strength, it's the core ability to realize and own yourself. There are external forces in everybody's life, as were in Anarkali's life, but the ability to realize that these are the choices I want to make for myself. The ability to stand up for yourself and say, no, whether the consequence, the choosing the thing which is best for you. Being subservient should not be celebrated. The fact that you are told that keep quiet and keep sacrificing, keep bearing the trauma that is being given to you should not be celebrated, I feel. We are giving now, that trend is changing, where we are giving our girls more agency. We are asking them, what is it that you want to do? A few years back, that was not the case. So I think for Anarkali specifically, leaving a mark behind, despite being erased from all historical recollections of her time, uh, you know, from her story, I want the readers to acknowledge that women do have undesirable jobs and they do remain. There are women who are at the fringes, even though they might be very well placed in life. Women have gained social capital from the people around them, and we are on the path to a breakthrough where women realize that I don't need to be subjugated. I am not a second class citizen. In the metros we see that more and more. However, if you step out into the interiors, there is still a lot of work to be done in that particular area. So I want more women to take up the societal space. I want them to become change makers, policy changers or policy makers. And being powerful or having that power does not always mean that you have to be cunning and you have to be, you have to do all the wrong things, etc., to climb the ladder, as most women are blamed to do. I think you have to be socially intelligent and aware of your surroundings. And that is why I wanted to highlight Anarkali's rise. That the fact that she was able to navigate through her circumstances and still find a mediocre of whatever she was looking. She was looking for acceptance. She was looking to live a life wherein she had the ability to make her choices at that particular time in life, in the world, or in that kind of society which was so parda based. And she did well for herself to a certain extent, but because one of the choices or the choices that she made had consequences, she also bore those consequences. So probably what I would like to say through the book is that yes, make your choices, but do know that every choice has a consequence and be ready to face that. It's okay whether you fall or you make a mistake. Forget the mistake, see how you can get out of it. And that is what she did. The other thing that that I wanted to kind of bring out was that most people give the credit of Anarkali's rise to the men around her. But they forget or they ignore the role that she played in her own success. So they like to, everybody likes to assume that powerful men fell in love with her and that is why she became so important. But as I was saying earlier, that she was not the only beautiful woman in the court. There were other beautiful women. And so, maybe don't always focus on the beauty. Focus on the brain behind that beauty, because that will take you to a much better place. And I think that's for the men probably, and even for the women. I mean, we are so fixated on our bodies and on our hair and on our faces and all that. We forget that this is who we are. We have to celebrate this. Let's not try to be factory like everybody is cut from the same mold. Let's not try to do that. Let's celebrate our own uniqueness in whatever way possible. And eventually, I think the last message that I wanted to give to all my readers is that karma will come calling, whether you are a man, whether you're a woman, whether you're a king, queen, a pawn, a courtesan, whoever you are. Whatever you do, you will have to bear the consequences of your choices. Yeah.
Also, a big part of my reading experience was that as I closed the book, I was like, Anarkali got a voice. And that's what I've actually said throughout, that your book provides a voice we are talking about in the 15th century, to a woman who was looked at, she's somebody who will, be in the harem and serve the kings or the prince or the princesses, or, not have a voice. But through this book, Anarkali got a voice. So coming to the character development, which is why Anarkali still stays with me, is that how did you develop and get into your characters to convey important lessons or skills? Like, are there any particular characters in the book that you feel that They embody the concept of lifelong learning or skill acquisition.
I think would be that character for me, wherein though he is only a sub character, he is not really explored as I would have liked to explore him, and his reasons to be, so. In my story, of course, he is only the friend of Salim. Just to give a little bit of context to the listeners, that he is the friend of Salim who I think had a soft spot for Anarkali, and even she had one for him. And why he excites me, or I find him very fascinating, is that everybody got away except him. He was eventually beheaded, and his role was that he allowed his friend, or he was maybe the conduit, or the what should I say, the catalyst to them meeting, so that's how I portrayed him. So for me, I would love to explore more about what he would have been feeling or thinking as a person. But the problem with writing a book is that you have a very limited, word count that you need to stick with, and then you don't want to stay, kind of stray from the story. So for me, Durjan was a very, very interesting character that I would have liked to explore a little bit more. I think even in the amount of material I was, or amount of time I was able to spend on him, I think I wanted to give him a certain depth, which is not only on the surface. And what you were talking about, that how do you give depth of character to these characters, or what are the important lessons? I think one of the important lessons that Durjan kind of told me as a writer was that. That you all come to play a role in this life. And his role was to be a friend or a sakha to Salim, and to probably be a part of all his shenanigans, all his wrongdoings, etc., and never have a life of his own. I mean, probably he was constantly trying to be the second person in that line, and that is a hard task. I think, like how we've read about the horses which are used to allow the main horse to run, so that they feel victorious because the side horse or the second horse is not running enough. That was the picture in my mind, that how would that horse feel, who probably has the ability to overshoot the main horse or the race horse, but he's not allowed to, because his role in this story is only to be a supporting character, and in life probably as well. So, and we see that everywhere. I mean, we see that in offices, we see that in our families, we see that there are people with a lot of potential, but because of circumstances, because of their birth, because of the finances, because of whatever reason, they're not able to reach that complete potential. So it's all very nice, and for people to say that find your dream and reach for it and those kind of things, but there are some times where you are unable to. Even in our own lives, I'm very sure we can kind of pick out one or two instances where we knew we could have done better, but we held ourselves back because we knew that we wanted someone else to kind of take away the prize, so to say. So that character actually helped me also to to understand a few things about your own personal life. And there are very few times when, as a writer, because I am the creator of that character, but still that character goes away, teaches me a few things of myself. So it was a very interesting, and thank you for that question, because I haven't spoken about this to anybody till now, and I've had several conversations about and discussions about Anarkali, but this question never really came up. So that's a wonderful question. Thank you for that. So I think lifelong skill. I think what you were asking me, the second part of your question. I think it is this, that I would like to write characters which people can imbibe into their life. when it is okay to accept that your life is not, that at times you may not reach your full potential, but but it's okay. So accepting that this is my role in life or the moment is also okay. You don't have to always be the overachiever. Yeah.
So, since you took out Durjan from the book, I wanted to ask you about Anarkali, the book. That how much writing this book enhanced your skills and in research, or how was it different from your other works? And what were the techniques that you used, and any different approach that you usually do while previous works? So,
Yeah.
do tell us something about.
Yeah. No, that's also true. Actually, when I look back on my writing journey, I can see my own evolution. I think I can actually chart my evolution because truly, Sukena, when I started writing, I was a very a very organic writer, what they call a panster in colloquial terms. That I would just keep writing and I would allow the characters to take over, etc. And I would, write about 100 lakh words, uh, you know, and I would then the difficulty would be that how do now I edit it or make it concise enough that the story speaks for itself, that it's a crisp story. So that is how I used to write earlier. Then with time, I realized that this is not going to work. I will have to start plotting. So then I started writing organically and also plotting simultaneously. I had to teach myself to plot. I had to do workshops. I had to, read articles. I had to attend, online classes, etc., to understand how to plot story, because it's very, someone says write a story, it's very easy to just go on writing, but how to collect your thoughts, how to make sure that when I'm reading that story, what is happening is that I know exactly what is happening. And so by the time Paradox of Dreams came out, that was a completely different genre for me. And normally I write in the relationship and the drama genre, family drama genre. But Paradox of Dreams is a mystery thriller. I couldn't do an organic, thing on that. I couldn't write just organically. I needed to know where the red herrings are going to be, how it's going to end, how the different characters are all going to be suspects. So everything had to be very clear for me from the beginning. So I began plotting even before I started writing the book. So I had a vague story in my head and I started plotting on Excel sheets, etc. And so, I learned how to kind of find my way around writing uh, concisely, writing clearly. And by the time Anarkali came around, I knew how to amalgamate both facets of myself as a writer, wherein it's not only plotting and it's not only organic writing. I wanted to do both because there was a lot of research that I had to kind of sift through and see what I wanted to use, what I didn't want to use. So while I was writing the book, the first draft, there was a one room which nobody was allowed to go in because there was a method to that madness that was there. It was all sheets and all papers and printouts, etc., which with the highlights and everything. And I said, nobody's cleaning this room, nobody's touching anything because if one paper gets lost, the whole thing will fall like a house of cards. So I think that 1 month or 2 months that it took me, I think that room was off limits to everybody. I would just come and brush away the dust or whatever. But yeah. So these are the sort of quirks that you have and how you as a person evolve while you are working on something. Then, of course, there is editing. One of the other things that was like a bitter pill that I learned to develop the taste for, because every word that you write is like very essential to an author. And though you know that the editor or the beta reader is telling you to cut out a certain character also, or certain part of the character, you feel like I was talking about Durjan. I him. I said, don't do anything. They said, no, this is taking away from the story. You have to. So these kind of things which are they're so close to your heart, and you may feel they are very close to your heart, but the reader but the reader might might want to just stick to, yeah, obviously they want to stick to the story. And of course, as I was telling you earlier, that the research has to be very focused. Otherwise, a person can get lost in the amount of, the material that is out there. So I had to learn to focus myself. I had to, kind of bring myself back again and again. No, I have to only find out about this aspect and not about the whole thing. Otherwise, this book is not getting written. And then, of course, there's the two, three things which are very personal. I think that you need to, as an author of many books, you need to keep going back to the reason why you start writing, because when you're a debut author, there is no weight of expectation, right? You are writing for the first time and you're just crossing your fingers that everybody likes your book. By the time you reach a certain number, everybody starts expecting a particular thing from you, and you're scared to try something new, because what is tried and tested, that is your strength, you are comfortable doing. But as soon as you start going into a new zone, you are doubting yourself as well. So I think there I learned that keep going back to understanding or relooking of why you started writing. Whether you started, I mean, this I'm saying it for everybody. For myself personally, I started writing only for myself. When I wrote my first book, I didn't even think it's going to be published. So I was in such a happy zone while I was writing it. So that is another thing. And then I think the only thing eventually what really helps you is when you help others, when you are able to extend a helping hand to others, in terms of you started out somewhere. So there are people who are every day, someone is wanting to write a story, wanting to learn something, wanting to know your story, so that they can find inspiration or find the courage to write their story. So I think being humble, being able to help others, however you can do that, I think that forms the basis of a person. For me, that is my benchmark, because we've met all kinds of people, right? In this industry, we've met people who are, very, very celebrated, but but may not be the most helpful of people. And you've met people who are very celebrated, but are very humble, who are very down to earth, who understand that everybody has to start somewhere. So you have to have a circle around you which is positive, which is ready to welcome you, which is ready to celebrate your happiness, your successes, rather than pull you down and be competitive towards each other. So I think that is what I stick to, is that I keep people who are, who are like-minded, in terms of that they're running their own race and I'm running my own race. So you are happy, I'm happy to, you do a good job, I'm happy to cheer for you. I do a good job, you are happy to cheer for me. And those are the people that I want around me. I don't want to be in useless competition, because every book has a reader. Every book will have a reader. I don't think there's a bad book. And I think we can just live peacefully in this world without trying to pull down someone else.
So do you feel that everybody has their own writing, like your quirks were that there was a room. So you feel that everybody has their own style, or you feel that because everybody, all the aspiring writers often have this, in their head they have this picture. But the more I talk about this to several authors, the more I learn that everybody has a different process. Do you think that debut writers or aspiring writers should have learn from it, that there are going to be different quirks, and maybe your quirk will also work for you? So rather than picking up from something, maybe pick up something but very particular about the writer's quirks.
So I think writing is like how you can relate it to driving. I feel writing is quite like driving. Before you buy a car, you learn how to drive. You learn the rules. And then you are, I will never say that you should break them, but then you have the confidence that if I'm overspeeding, I know that I can control it. Right? Writing is similar. Before you write a book, learn uh, learn how to write the book, learn the rules of writing, I mean, you can say there are no rules to writing, etc., but you do need to know how the foundation is set up to write a book. You can break those rules later, but first we have to learn that. And I don't see, I mean, if you have a lot of every time we have a discussion in an offline setup, there are people who will come up to you and say, okay, what is your process of writing, and I'm wanting to write a book. And I think that's okay. That's people can that is why people want to know your story, because maybe they feel that by imitating or by doing the same thing, even they can reach, or they can write a book, or do whatever you are doing. I mean, I think it's okay to try, but eventually I think what learning how to form that skeleton on which your book is going to stand, which is the how to do the setting, how to start writing the book, how to edit the book, how to there's so many aspects to that, how to build strong characters, make sure that the story is crisp, or that it has a beginning, a middle, and an end. All of that can be taught. You can learn it in a workshop. I did a workshop to begin because I wanted to know, how do I, so you have a creative burst. Creativity for me at least comes in bursts. I have a wonderful idea. I want to write it down. A short story you can write in 3 hours, or one day, or half a day. A full length novel you cannot. So I would just leave the work, and then, because we all have full lives, so I would write as much as I could and then leave the story. And when I would come back to it, so once I would come back to the story, that creativity or that creative burst would fizzle out. So I had to go and do a workshop to understand how do I stay connected to my story. And that is where I learned that you have to write every day, come what may. And it held me in good stead. If I'm writing a story and I'm building a story, then I write every day without fail. Even if I write one paragraph, 3 lines, or review my work that I have done earlier, but I will find out time, even if I'm sitting in the night and writing it or reviewing my work, I will stay connected to my story. So these are the small nuances you learn. Once you are, like, you have to go to school to learn ABCs. It is like going to school and learning how to write. That's why there are so many creative writing courses. There are so many workshops available. There are so many, places where you can go and learn. So, and even now, I think there are so many master classes that one can attend, because you do need inspiration, you do need motivation. So, you hear people who do podcasts, or big authors who are celebrated worldwide, who do podcasts, and you get that inspiration that this is the way they are thinking. I would encourage people who want to write to surround by themselves with people who write. That's very, very essential. Reading, writing, and people who like to talk about it. It's and not kind of keep it very close, because we draw inspiration from each other. You see someone doing and writing, or you feel, oh, she's writing, let me also write, and we help each other. Okay, you are getting stuck here, why don't you try this? So have a circle around you who is wanting to do something rather than pull you back, and I would suggest that.
Actually, I would agree with you, because it kind of gives you the courage to write. I mean,
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
when I started that, I was surrounded by writers and many kind of, so that gave me the courage to write one story, like one short
Yeah.
story. It gives a lot of courage
Yeah.
to continue writing.
Yeah.
So,
And
Harshali,
writing a short
yeah,
story is more difficult than writing a long form, because everything has to be So when I have to
Practice.
submit a short story, I'm more stressed than I have when I have to submit a long form story.
So you feel that long form is more easy,
It's
or
easier for me because you have enough space, you have the landscape to develop your character, you have you have that word count where you're not constantly looking at, the word count going higher and higher. Short stories, everything, it has to be very concise, very crisp, and your message has to go through very clearly. Otherwise, with the kind of attention spans there are these days, people are not going to sit and read the work. So yeah, I think short stories are difficult to write for me personally because they require more focus. You can't just build a character, build a setting. You can't take your time with it. Everything has to be now, instant gratification. Yeah.
that is also there. So I have come to the end of my questions. Thank you so much, Harshali. This was a really, how would you say, insightful and really enlightening conversation that I had with you. And thank you for the platform for giving us a chance to have this conversation with you. May we have more such conversations. May you have more such, insights and advices to give us. Always a pleasure to have a conversation with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sukena, for doing this. I really enjoyed talking to you. Especially because I know you're a very insightful reader and you are a very prolific reader and a writer. And so I'm glad. Thank you so much for having this conversation. I hope everybody is listening and enjoying. Yeah.
Thank you.